Hey guys, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. And today we're actually going to be talking about a really interesting topic about an article I just read. And I think this is absolutely fascinating because it kind of dovetails with a lot of the work I've actually done revolving around trust and technology. And so here are the notes that I've got. And I think you're going to find this very interesting. It comes from Vice News. Now, an analysis was conducted by politics researchers at Princeton University and New York University combined. Now, what they did was they studied American Facebook users, and their information suggests that older generations were more likely to share fake news during the 2016 presidential election. And I promise you, I'm not getting into politics here because I think this speaks to a greater issue. Now, let me give you some notes on this about what they found. More than 90% of Facebook users in this study did not actually share misinformation with their friends, their feeds, all that kind of stuff, according to researchers. So it's actually only 10% of us that would have been sharing fake news. Now, of the 10% that did, the study found that age was the most significant factor. The study found, and I quote, "The oldest Americans, those especially over 65, were more likely to share fake news to their Facebook friends." Now, this was true even when other factors were considered, like ideology or partisanship and all of that. So it didn't matter if you were on the left or the right. Odds are you were over 65 years old when you were sharing this information. Now, I continue. According to this study, each age cohort shared more misinformation than the preceding one, meaning younger people shared the least fake news. People ages 65 and over shared 7 times as many of these fake stories as people 18 to 29 did, which obviously could have a few different factors, and I will get into that soon. Now, if you're interested in what they are identifying as fake news, I will let you know the methodology according to Vice News. They define fake news from a list of websites identified by BuzzFeed News media editor Craig Silverman, I do not know him or his politics, in a series of investigative reports on highly shared domains throughout the election. They basically further refine this list by excluding outlets that could be considered partisan on the left or the right. So Breitbart, for example, would be one of those ones that is considered right-leaning and partisan. And the study basically says that they try to differentiate partisanship from fake news, and so they wound up with 21 domains, including True Pundit and Denver Guardian. I don't know either of those, and on and on. Now, the lead author of this from Princeton University, Andrew Guest, said, and I quote, "We were interested in a lot of questions related to learning about the political campaigns via social media, but I can't say we had this particular topic in mind when we started. But it didn't take us long to realize what we had." Now, I find this interesting. And the reason that I'm bringing this up isn't because I'm going to sit here and say fake news is proliferating or not, all of that. I'm not talking about that. What I want to ask the question is, should we be combating trust here? And if so, how do we effectively combat it? And I think, and this is my own hypothesis, but I think I'm right on this, and feel free to disagree and tell me why, is that I think the older generations are sharing 7 times more than the youngest generation, primarily because you've grown up in a society, or rather they've grown up in a society where they trust. They trust the news that they've seen, whether it's formerly Walter Cronkite or something along those lines. And by virtue of it, when they are reading something, I think they have a higher probability and definitely a higher possibility of both trusting and sharing the news source. Now, when you combine that with, let's say, a political view on the left or the right, and you start looking at sources in your search bubble, like left-leaning sites or right-leaning sites, you start to identify and align with that and trust that because it fits your worldview, and therefore you are sharing that out, whether that's true information or not. And so I think that's really interesting because when we are looking at cybersecurity, and my first TED Talk was literally called Trust Sucks, we talk about the types of trust that we have in the infrastructure around us, the environment around us, those connecting to social media, and obviously those who are reading news and then sharing that out. And so if we are going to look at technology, cybersecurity, and information delivery holistically through the same lens, then trust becomes the driving factor. How do we educate a population that is being given disinformation, that is trusting an environment and an infrastructure around them, to basically create a filter for their perception on what this is, to validate facts, to check all of this? And we know that it can be done. If we are looking at Finland, for example, in their election, I believe it was 2015, it might have been 2017, but I'm pretty positive it was 2015, the Finnish government went on a campaign to educate their population on how to spot fake news or misinformation, primarily coming from Russia. And there's been a lot of studies done by that I won't get into. But by virtue of that, the interference and the fake news proliferation in Finland was vastly lower than it was anywhere else where there's been any kind of influence, if you will, into this. So I'm curious to know your thoughts on this. How do we combat trust when it comes to technology, infrastructure, information delivery, and all of that? And, should we be ramping up education? And if so, what does that look like? Should we just leave this alone and kind of let this figure itself out? Should we simply, if we are younger than 65, not trust anyone over 65? You tell me what this looks like, but I'd be very curious to start a discussion on this, because I think this is a multifaceted problem that we're going to have for years to come, until the 65 and older are pretty much no longer with us. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, guys.